And I want to start off the forum this morning with a scripture reading that is a great calling from Paul to the Philippians, and for us today to get outside of ourselves and to be thinking about others as we talk about the findings from our neighborhood observations and interactions this fall and what it means for us in the future. So please listen prayerfully to this scripture, and then we'll get started with all the information and discussion that we have today. I'm going to be reading from Philippians 2. And this is the Message version, so it's a little more with today's language. If you've gotten anything at all out of following Christ, if his love has made any difference in your life, if being in a community of the Spirit means anything to you, if you have a heart and if you care, then do me a favor. Agree with each other, love each other, be deep-spirited friends. Don't push your way to the front. Don't sweet-talk your way to the top. Put yourself aside and help others get ahead. Don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. Forget yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand.
Thanks for that introduction, Randy. I'm Jill Michelson. I'm also on the Mission Forward team on the neighborhood subcommittee. And I'm just going to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about what the Mission Forward team has been doing to date. So you may have heard of what we're doing. You may have seen some things appear on walls, like our fabulous timeline quilt. You may have participated in surveys or small group discussions. But basically, the spring and summer and fall, the Mission Forward team has been going through a process of research, outreach, listening, and discernment. And discernment is one of those words that I always hear from people when they want you to prayerfully try to discern God's call for you. That's the kind of thing that people who are asked to be on teams get asked. But discernment is, a very thoughtful process of evaluating and going through what we've learned. So what we're doing today is providing you with the results of our discernment on these previous tasks. And before I get started on the next things that are coming along, I just wanted to give a shout out for our next forum topic next Sunday, which is going to be on the Proton Beam Therapy Center. And so if you're interested in that, I encourage you to come next Sunday. So to date, again, we've been going through this evaluation and discernment process. On November 16th, the other two subcommittees of the Mission Forward team will be presenting the survey, and the small group conversation teams will be up here doing something like this, presenting what you guys have shared with us. In early December, we're going to be assembling the ministry site profile, which is basically our job application for the future pastor. This is how we advertise. This is how we tell them who we are and what we do and what we want to do and our dreams and our goals. And then in mid-December, we'll be presenting the ministry site profile to the council, and there'll be a nomination of the call committee at that point. And then in January, we will be starting the call process. And Pastor Susan, feel free to jump in here if I've got something wrong.
That's the plan.
So far, okay, good so far. So the neighborhood group, what we've done so far is, well, we put together a timeline of the church's formation, which is over there on the wall. If you want to take a look at it afterwards, it tracks when Mount Olive was founded, major achievements and steps in the creation of our congregation, building additions, building demos, things like that, and also provides a bit of a context on where the city of Rochester was growing and how these things match up. So how growth of our church matches growth of the city of Rochester and some other interesting world events that were going on at the time. We also did a walking tour, an observing tour of our neighborhood, where we went out in pairs and just kind of had our eyes open and just observed to see what our neighborhood looks like now. We sponsored a forum where we had a roundtable on the topic of Rochester demographics and growth and what are kind of current events and current challenges that we foresee happening in our community in the near future. We also did a listening tour of the neighborhood where we were a little bit more active, walking around the neighborhood, talking to our neighbors. And then the last thing we did, and when I say we, I did, we actually watched some of the candidate forums for the city council wards 3 and 5, and I have to say I watched the meters 1 and 2, but I didn't make it all the way through. So we're just watching what's going on in politics to see kind of what are the hot topics in the community. So we talked a bit about the timeline already. I think I've probably addressed this enough. You guys can go take a look at the quilt when you're done. One of the things that we did with the timeline, though, is we left plenty of space on the future end of the timeline. And we invited members to write down what they thought they wanted to see in Mount Olive's future on the timeline. So if you have a chance, go over and take a look and see what some visions for Mount Olive's future as envisioned by Mount Olive people. And then, Randy, you want to talk about our walking tours?
So we had a great group that came and we walked around the neighborhood. We even had a furry four-legged friend that came with us on our walking tour.
This is that's just the watching.
Yep. We had our group, we went around, we didn't have a set area that we hit. We just walked and felt wherever we were led is where we were going to walk. And so we used all of our senses. We were listening, we were smelling, we were watching, because when we come and go to church, I don't live in this specific neighborhood. Sometimes you're just zipping in and out and you don't realize all of the different things that are going on in the neighborhood, the bus stops, what the houses look like, what other churches are around, what other schools are around. I live not too far from this neighborhood a while ago, and I didn't even realize what school that was down the block, because I don't have kids, and so it was a great way to just become familiar with the neighborhood again. Okay. So, as you can see, we have Mount Olive with the big push pin in the middle. And then we do have some other attractions around the area. We have a bike trail down here in the corner. We've got a couple bus stops along 18th Avenue, some parks. We've got John Adams Middle School up there. And we've got a business down over here. Let's see. Yeah, we've got the church there. Yeah, and so this is, overall, the observations we had were this was a quiet residential neighborhood, overall very homogeneous group of people who live in the neighborhood. Like we talked about, there are some amenities in the area, some bus stops and linked to a trail, but it's definitely a neighborhood that is car only. It's not within easy walking distance of downtown or other amenities that people use, like bigger shops and stores. So this was some of the observations we had. And then one of the other activities we had was the adult forum, and I'll let Joni talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we had a good old time with the adult forum. Anybody here attend the adult forum that we hosted with the speaker from Homestead County Planning and also the Diversity Council? So that was actually really interesting, and there was just a deluge of information that came from these folks. So I'm going to just try and condense it down for you, so you don't have to, although you could go to our YouTube site, Brad, yes? You could actually view the forum on the YouTube site. So there were discussions on demographics, job growth, what kind of stresses on our public infrastructure and our public services are going to occur due to this tremendous growth. The international presence in the community, the importance of students to our future. And then we were able to, through this process, identify some community needs that are just only going to grow in DMC, and some community needs that our congregation may be well suited to serve. So just to to set the stage a little bit, so in any given population, there's what you call the pyramid of age. On the bottom are the young, and on the top are the old, and in theory, you have a pyramid that has a lot of young people at the bottom and, old people at the top, because as you advance in age, you all move to Florida. But what we've learned from our friends at the planning office is that in Rochester, we don't actually have a pyramid population. We have what I call a Santa Claus population, where it's kind of, you've got kind of a skinny pointy hat in the top, and then you've got kind of a great round belly in the middle, and then you kind of narrows down again at the feet. And so what this tells us is that we've got kind of the greatest generation hanging out there at the top, right? Not as many left as we would like. We've got the baby boomers, which are the majority of the bulge, kind of aging their way through the population, gracefully, I might add, very gracefully. Then we have people like myself, Gen Xers, and then we have the millennials who are forming kind of the skinnier bottom. So the nice thing about a pyramid, an age pyramid, is that you've got a lot of younger people who are out there working, paying taxes, paying into Social Security, kind of providing the money for the rest of us as we age out to use government services and things like that. So something like this poses a bit of a problem, because of what it means is that you don't even have as many young people who are going to be able to support this aging population as these people are going to start to need to use services. So this is a real challenge for our community. This is a lot of numbers right here, and the only reason I've got it up there is so it reminds me what I need to talk about. But one of the things that we learned in the projections that the planning department put together for 2013 is that married couples with children, households with married couples with children, are going to become the minority type of household in Rochester. They're no longer going to form the majority. It's going to be the folks who are living alone, whether they're older folks living alone or just younger folks who just don't want to settle down for whatever reason. These folks are going to make up half of the population that are in households in the city of Rochester in 2030. Half of the population are going to be folks who are living alone. And also, the growth rate, or the share of the growth, or the increase in these populations, married couples with children are going to be basically flat, they're not going to be growing. People who are living alone or living alone and are older are going to be one of the highest growing demographics. Again, Santa Claus, that age group just moving up through the chain. And householders age 65 and older are again going to have one of the largest, are just going to continue to be one of the largest portions of our population. So we need to be aware of this, and we need to be aware of, again, what that means to our community. Another thing that's coming with the DMC efforts projected, and this is all 2030 numbers, is that the types of jobs that are going to come in with this tremendous initiative. And yes, we're going to have a lot of good paying healthcare jobs that come in. We're going to have a lot of good information jobs. These are the top 4 jobs in order that they say are going to be in our community in 2030. We're going to have what we call other services, folks who work at the Quick Trips or the Walmarts or things like that are going to be able to probably barely break poverty level. And then we've got the folks in the hospitality industry, which is such an important part of our downtown. And the numbers in parentheses behind these different job types, these are the average or the net weekly wage of these earners. And this is in today's dollars. This is not what they're going to be making in 2030, because that doesn't look very attractive in 2030. But the lodging and restaurant people are not going to be able to make more than what is considered poverty level income. And this is something that's going to put some strain on our community. So just to summarize, traditional nuclear families are not going to be the norm anymore. 60% of our population growth has been persons of color or Hispanics. We're going to be more diverse. The actual amount of people in the labor force is going to decline. 97%, this is I thought was really interesting, 97% of our net migration into our community will be international. So when you balance the people who are leaving and the people who are coming in, 97% of the people who are coming into our community and staying here are going to be international. Does anybody here speak another language? Wonderful. I think we're going to need to make a listing of folks. Another thing we learned is that between 30 and 40% of our own internal labor force is going to include children that maybe we're not educating so well. Some of these minority populations are not currently being well served by some of the existing school programs. We learned that children that have not achieved good reading ability by grade 3 are not going to thrive in our community. They're going to drop out. The statistics say by 10th grade, kids that were not able to read by grade 3 are going to be dropping out like flies. And of course, as we know, the baby boom are going to continue, I don't know why I say mostly, continue to age. I suppose the only way you don't age is if you die, so.
The alternative.
The alternative, yes. So a few takeaways here. So we need our youth to succeed because there's not that many youth coming in or that are in our community. When I retire, I'm going to need all of the kids in school now to do really, really well at their jobs so they can pay a lot of taxes. Not to pay a lot of taxes, but you know what I mean, so they can, help support me. We're going to have an aging population, and we're going to have a decent proportion of that population that are going to be living alone. This is going to be a clear need in our community. And we're going to have an increasingly diverse community. We're going to have if we want to see growth in our church, and we see most of the migration into our community coming from international folks, maybe we should consider reaching out to these communities, or at least, think about what it means to be welcoming to people of different ethnic backgrounds. I think I probably touched on most of these. There is acknowledged to be a lack of affordable housing right now, and this problem is only going to get worse, especially for the service worker population, folks who are at or below the poverty level. They can't live in the downtown, it's too expensive. If they live in an outstate community, they can't get transit into the downtown where they work if they're not male. I talked about single-person households, communicating with non-English cultures. I call it the 7% barrier, but it's really kind of a 7% opportunity. The lady from our international friend, I'm just blanking on her name. Yeah, Savita, told us that really what she's learned in working with international visitors to Rochester is that only 7% of communication actually occurs with the spoken word of your chosen language. There's a whole 93% of welcoming gestures and postures and smiles and actions that speak as loud as actually communicating with someone in their native language. So just because someone doesn't speak English doesn't mean that we can't find a way to be welcoming to this person. There is a desperate need for skilled medical staff as well as other skilled workers, and we really need every child to do well in school. All right, Brady, take it away.
So earlier in September, we did an observing tour where we just walked around looking, using our senses. But Jill and I and her dog Drew, we walked around the neighborhood, and we wanted to listen to our neighbors and to hear what they had to say and hear do you know about Mount Olive? What do you think about Rochester? And so we walked around. We didn't have a script. We weren't going to go out and do Bible thumping. We just wanted to listen and see how familiar people are with our church. What we realized is everybody rakes leaves. It's fall time. It was a beautiful day. And of course in Minnesota we always talk about the weather, especially with people we don't know. That's a great opening line, so that was a good icebreaker. Folks live here because it's quiet and safe. And some of the folks that we actually met, they decided to live in this neighborhood, and it was probably on the edge of Rochester at that time. And now it's grown so much more in the northwest area. but increasingly ethnically diverse. One of the neighborhoods we were in, there was an Egyptian family that was Christian, a Jordanian family that was Muslim. There was Jehovah's Witnesses. There was,
The girls were selling lemonade.
yeah, there were some girls that were selling lemonade. They had a lemonade stand and they were trying to buy pizza, but we came with the dog and they were explaining to us that they couldn't touch the dog because of their religion. And so they were very nice about it, and we learned something new. And we also didn't have a quarter to buy lemonade, and they felt awful. But there was a range of people who had lived in the neighborhood from 8 years to 24 years. Still people who had lived in their original homes, had picked that lot, had bought, built their home right there. Some neighborhoods had kind of neighborhoods within neighborhoods, or neighbors who were really close and some who just really didn't interact. There was kind of a quieter street, kind of a dysfunctional street where they didn't really like the neighbors across the way and they weren't real friendly. The international street where there was just people from all walks of life that lived there, and a street where there was lots of kids, and so they were all running around putting signs up for lemonade. But there was a difference between kind of the passive and active neighborliness. The passive ones are, you just kind of come and go, you say hello, but then one of my coworkers, she said that she was kind of an aggressive neighbor. They were farm kids, and those neighbors, they came and they were from Detroit and didn't really want to interact with us, but we went over there and by golly, we brought potluck and we made them sit down and we sat in our chairs and we made them interact. And she said, and now we're the best of friends. And so she reiterated how important it is to be an aggressive neighbor and a welcoming neighbor. And you're not going to get people just coming over to your door saying hi, And then just informal community gathering spaces. There was a lady that the very first person we met who had rain gardens, and she was chit-chatting about the outdoor spaces, and nature was very important to her. And God is thinking about our outdoor spaces that we have here, and what could we do more, and what activities could we do more to welcome people into our space. What we did learn was that the knowledge of Mount Olive is born on the backs of the members who walk around the neighborhood. There was some people who said, oh yeah, we see your members walking through here all the time. And the lady who had lived there for 20 plus years said, oh, I know, where's Mount Olive? And so it really is about us getting out there and being an aggressive neighbor to those around us. And we were thinking that something like a national night out done on a regular basis would be a great way to reach out to our neighbors. And I think it was done a few years ago, but getting into a more active role with those neighborhood meetings and gatherings. And then left to their own devices, they're not going to come here. That we need to be the ones going out and spreading the word about how open and welcoming we are here, and how we want to have our neighbors join us. Then I'll let Jill talk about the candidate forums.
I should say that, Bethany hasn't had a chance to talk about anything yet, but she tried, by golly, to lead some neighborhood groups on some walks through, and it's just, had to be out of town, but there's a lot of planning that went into this, and a lot of kicking around ideas, and just because she hasn't been up to talk yet doesn't mean that she wasn't really busy, really involved. So I know you were feeling lonely. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the candidate forums. So we had this idea that we know that there are some public discussion groups at the public library where they kind of kick around different kind of issues of the day and talk about things important to the community. And unfortunately for scheduling and I think cancellation reasons, we weren't able to go to one of those. So the next best thing we thought would be to actually either attend or watch the candidate forums for the two city council positions that are currently up, and that would be Ward 3, which is kind of the Northwest Territory up there, Highway 52, 55th Street, kind of that neck of the woods, and then Ward 5, which is actually where I live. And then we also tried to watch the mayor's forum, but I couldn't watch that for very long. I tried. hoping to get out of these forums an idea of, what, and it's sponsored by the League of Women Voters, and, shout out to them for getting these on, and for also making them available online so that I could watch them, and I would encourage you to watch them too, if either of these two pairs are your candidates. I was hoping to get a feel for kind of what are the hot button topics in Rochester, and what I learned was the hot button topic is DMC, 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 DMC. I'm like, okay, well, we kind of knew that already. Every other question was DMC this or DMC that. And if it wasn't DMC, it was something to do with developer fees or sanitary sewer districts or business growth or things like that. And I thought, well, these are not traditionally topics that you would see a church community gather to try and make a difference. And charter communications. When that topic came up, I thought, man, it's good that I'm not actually in this meeting for real, because I would be up there pounding my fist to say about that whole topic. But there was, I believe it was Ward 3, the Ward 3 discussion, where the candidates were asked, it was kind of a catch-all question towards the very end, after they had exhausted their list of DMC questions. And they said, what other issues do you think are kind of flying under the radar? Things that are not being talked about enough, or maybe not being talked about at all. And so one of the candidates said something along the lines of, I want to value the history of Rochester while leading us into a glorious future with vision. I'm like, okay, I've heard that answer 5 times already. And then the other guy kind of got thoughtful. He said, we haven't really talked about the whole issue about affordable housing for these workers that are coming into our community. They're not medical professionals, particularly the folks in the hospitality industry. And a lot of this is tied to transportation. So these are people who work downtown. They can't afford to live downtown. They have to get there and back again. They have to potentially fight for parking. And this is going to be a real problem in the future. So this is one of the things that this gentleman was going to make sure was addressed as the city council candidate. I'm like, oh, okay, good. That, there's a topic that is actually something that we've been hearing more about, and at least somebody in government is paying attention to it. I just wish it wasn't like at the 3rd of 3 of these candidate forums that we're watching for someone to start talking about this. And what this really pointed out, made clear to me, was that in our public access channels, in our candidate forums, in the political process that culminates in the great frenzy of voting in November, we're not really talking about these folks who are maybe not, call them disenfranchised. Maybe they're working 2 jobs and they don't maybe have time to go out to vote. They're not friends with the guys that meet at the fancy coffee shop downtown every Tuesday morning to solve the world's problems. They're just kind of quietly going about their jobs, trying to feed themselves and feed their families. These people don't really have a voice in this political process, and they need somebody to speak for them and to live for them. And so that's something I think that we could think about.
On this topic, somebody at work set up a little book exchange, and I picked up a book, Nickel and Dime, and I think everyone should read that. It speaks directly to this topic. It was a reporter or a journalist who went kind of undercover as a working poor person, and she worked cleaning houses, worked as a waitress, worked at a Walmart, and she talks about the huge problem faces these folks, housing especially.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get a feel for walking a mile in someone's shoes, you should definitely check out that book, Nickel and Dime, to get that viewpoint. All right, so I think at this point, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, we do have an activity that we're going to move into after we fielded questions about the Mission Forward team, about the neighborhood subgroups activities. Anybody have anything they want to ask us or address?
I'll just kind of reiterate what you said. I've lived in Elton Hills for the vast majority of my life in 2 different locations. But I grew up here, went to Elton Hills Elementary, went to John Allen, and exactly what you said up there is so true. This neighborhood, there are neighborhoods within neighborhoods. It's quiet, safe, as long short-term people, long-term people, a lot of residents come in and out of this neighborhood. So what you found, I would agree with everything you found up there, having lived here as long as I have. So I live here now because I like it.
Sure.
So how do we plan on using this information? I mean, is it to help us choose a pastor? Is it to help us develop new programs or like?
Yes. Well, it's up to us how we use this information. I mean, in the near term, we're filling out the ministry site profile, right? That's something that's going to happen, beginning of December. And as part of the ministry site profile, there's a part where you're asked to describe your church, describe your congregation, describe your community. We've got people potentially from the other side of the United States, possibly, yes, from outside of our area that may not be familiar with Rochester, have never heard of DMC. So we have to be able to paint an accurate picture to them because it's very important to us that we get a good fit for our next senior pastor. But also I think that, by going through this thoughtful process, we're finding out, we've got a lot of service-based programs that we do as a congregation. Where should we be putting our efforts that's going to match up with the needs of our neighborhood and the needs of our community? So I think, yeah, that should be part of the discussion going forward.
And I'll just speak to that too. Like Jill said, we have a lot of service programs that, as we look at new leadership in the future, where do we put our energies and what are the needs going to be that we need to meet as a church in our community? And as somebody who works in the healthcare industry and hospice, we have patients who are in their homes alone and seeing the information about more people being in their homes all by themselves. They don't have kids in town, family members in town. How important volunteerism is going to be for our community and supporting people who are living alone, making sure that kids are succeeding and we're helping with the child literacy and making sure that we're volunteering in the schools and supporting our kids at church that they can read and succeed. And those are kind of my couple of takeaways, like, wow, we really need to put our energy into caring for our aging population and for people who are living alone and really making sure our kids are succeeding. And so helping tease some of that out was really helpful for me anyways.
I would agree with that, but I also say we need to do it in our own congregation in addition to the community, because we do have a lot of people that live along elderly folks. We have children that probably are slipping through the cracks in the school system. So in addition to the community, I would hope that we would also make sure that our own church family is taken care of.
Absolutely, and there's already a group that's starting to form, the caring group too, that will, I think, be a good starting point for that as well. Pastor Susan.
And then could I just say too, we want the next pastor to know all of this. And I know you're looking to that person to help you clarify what new initiatives might you need to make. What kinds of adaptations might you want to make to the existing programs that you're involved in. But let me just remind you that if that person does come from outside the Rochester area, don't look to them to come in and tell you what needs to be done. You are the experts on your context and your community. And they need for you to tell them what you see, what your vision is, what your ministry will be and what your commitments are. And they will lead you and they will help you and they will bring that vision and energy and help clarify that for you. But don't wait for someone to come and direct it. But welcome someone who wants to hear you tell them where you are and what's happening here, and invite them to engage with you in owning the ministry together as partners.
I think we have a lot of people in this congregation, in this community, that see where the needs are and can see, and are actually very involved and networked into places where those needs can really be filled and worked on. But it's going to take all of us banding together and identifying where our passions are and where our vision is and making a difference in this community as things change. That's going to really be all the difference. So with that, I'll invite Bethany up here to start the activity off.
So we don't have too much time left, but I think it'd be fun to kind of talk as in your tables about some different things. So we rented the public engagement toolkit for DMC from the library to kind of help us talk about what we see going on in the community from our congregation's perspective so that we can relay this information to the Destination Medical Center and Rochester Homestead Planning Committee so that they can hear some of our perspectives. There's this whole toolkit that could have taken us up to 2 hours, and we decided to focus on a few specific areas. So Jill and Randy are going to be passing out some pieces of paper and some pens, and as you're at your table, you can kind of talk about this. But I'm going to talk to you about one of the activities that was right before it. It talked about community weaknesses in our community, future threats that we have, different opportunities that we have in our community with Destination Medical Center, and some of the changes that are going to be occurring in the community, and what are some of those strengths. So how strengths and weaknesses both provide opportunity for us to face some of these future threats. And so the two different forms that are passed out talk about how we can what values in our community will help us create a good future for us. And then the other one is about 3 words, so it's pretty basic, that describe what's appealing and attractive to you and your family, and then the next generation. So I think this is important in our congregation as we're looking to that next generation, how we think the age demographics may change, how we think the different cultures that will be coming to the community will change, and what will be attractive to these cultures in our community, and how we can work together to embrace some of these ideas. So the goal of this is just to kind of provide some information, and we want everyone's perspective, so even if there are 2 ideas on a piece of paper that don't seem to match up, that's just fine. Just kind of get individual comments and ideas down to see what you think within your table.
I have my video up.
You do have it up?
Yeah, I have it up. You just need to hit play on it when we're to that point. And then turn the mic on for it.
Well, this is a value. Yes. I teach some of our neurologists in high school. Yeah, and so